Misassembly. All right, welcome everyone to the first episode of the Misassembled podcast, brought to you by the team of Misassembly. I've got the Misassembly co-creators here, Dan Crosier and Pete Roskop. I'm your host, Gerard G. Kaihui. Welcome, guys. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well.
Great. So this is going to be the first of hopefully many podcasts to come about Misassembly. Dan, would you mind kind of explaining what the whole premise of Misassembly is for our viewers or listeners?
The long form of it, sadly, is that a number of artists got together back, was it like 2014 or so, and we were doing art posters. Gerard, you were a part of that, and we wanted to do other stuff, and I think that just kind of naturally evolved into doing film and comic books. I eventually started the LLC. I started that with Pete like a year and a half ago or so, and we've been trying to develop creative projects together. There's quite a few things kind of in the oven, but that's kind of it.
The idea and the process actually started about 27 years ago at a lunch table in 7th or 8th grade when we were talking about making our own movies. So the first conversation we ever had about this was in junior high. Didn't go that far. We didn't really talk about a business plan at that time, but I remember that we were actually sitting there at lunch talking about it. So it's been a long time coming, but it's been one of those ideas.
Yeah, Pete's got a much better memory than I do. He didn't spend his art school days huffing glue. He was actually making something of himself. Yeah. Pete and I used to go to school together. I think it started all the way back in the 6th grade. So we've been longtime friends and kind of looked out for each other. Well, he looked out for me a lot more than anything. But yeah, it's been nice in the last few years to be able to also reconnect and this creative passion.
So would you say both of you guys kind of came together from your love of popular culture or films or movies and comics or all of the above?
Porn.
No, I think that watching and you'll learn very quickly that Dan is a lot of the creative side of the equation. I'm more of the business side of it. I kind of worry about the logistics and the financing and stuff like that, as everybody else does, but I'm just a little bit more anal retentive about it. But and in the industry and dealing with stuff, I did theater, and I think Dan and I we were in a couple plays together, and we did a couple of things in high school, but really always stayed in touch with Dan and helping out in building sets or working on this or working on that with him. Several different projects where we were always working with other partners. We were never just working on our own stuff for us. It seemed like for the first couple of years that I really was working with Dan, volunteering on various projects for his friends, this is kind of this is the first step in really focusing and targeting our energies on stuff that we birth from the very beginning to the very end, and really focusing on those things and trying to bring them under a label and under our wing, because there's so many creative people out there that we loved partnering with, and we do partner with, but trying to bring them under, like, having a place where we can foster that and grow that. I didn't really see that out there, or I didn't see an opportunity for me to be able to put my talents and my vision on it. It seemed like I was always piggybacking on somebody, so we kind of wanted to make our own and invite those that we want to work with into it.
So Peter, you said that basically you kind of your strengths, your core strengths, especially with the Misassembly group, kind of focuses more on the financial side of things, the managing aspects of things, because as we know, creatives can very much be creative, but it's kind of hard to kind of wrangle them and manage them. Would you say you're kind of also a wrangler as well for this group?
Yeah, in an aspect of it. I mean, it seems like on smaller projects that we've worked on, it's and everybody that's involved is very passionate about it, and so I think that um, everybody's focused on that. You just need that person though that keeps driving one particular point. So if we're talking about financing, if we're talking about location, if we're talking about logistics, also nobody likes reading contracts. So I'm that person, reading, defining, figuring out things, solving problems. I think that, with a couple of projects that we've already worked on, being able to take all that off the plate and deal with that, then the creatives can focus on being creative and giving us a good product.
And then Dan, as kind of the head creative chief and honcho of Misassembly, I know as you mentioned earlier, we kind of started off doing posters, promoting various films in the beginning. At what point did you decide to kind of create the Misassembly banner to include films and videos?
I think initially it was probably a conversation that you and I, when we were working on poster art together for some of our favorite film projects. I always I like the name Misassembly. I put the LLC together, and which was pretty easy. Unfortunately, they let anybody do that. They let me. And then just kind of to me, film and comic books, which is the other thing I'm known for doing. They're all fantastic storytelling tools and mediums. So one just informs the other pretty well, and it just seemed like a natural fit. It was either that or go back into Circus Soleil.
I know you're very nimble, so that'll be excellent to see you there.
Yep. I'm great at contorting.
So I think for Pete, I think you brought some interesting points as far as from the business side, the actual business standpoint. I think listeners would get a really good insight into listening to the show because they can understand or get an insight into the whole business aspects of things, the contracts, as you mentioned, the logistics of things, the accounting, the wonderful act of sponsors for a project. But so Dan, on the other hand of things, on the creative side of things, why should people listen to this Misassembled podcast?
I think they might be able to relate to or learn from our ventures and our mistakes. In these types of endeavors, you really can't be afraid to put yourself out there and really lose yourself and trip and fall and hopefully learn from those. One of the big projects that Pete and I were able to put together with you and another group of people like Elise and Kudus, being Camp Crash, we were able to create a project with like a single location because, well, finance was a big issue, and really work within those parameters and then make something special. I mean, granted, it's an ongoing project, but in figuring out how to work within those confines, I always think of limitations breed innovation. I learned that early on in art school, and I still apply that now. As an art student, I never had a budget. I never had money. I was always getting tetanus. But you find stuff and figure out, how can you manipulate this material to whatever end, to some type of vision. And, film is that way to me. It's just, orchestrating larger components, whether it's, personnel and materials and, costuming, and how do you create that kind of symphony? It's really just creative problem solving. Working on like business plans and scripts and budgets and stuff. Sorry, but really going back to working on scripts and how that informs budgeting and itemizing every logistical nightmare, which ends up being kind of a logistical joy, because then it's mapped out, you can see it on paper, and you can communicate it a little bit better to the team that you're working with. And then, guys like Pete, he can, keep me in check, and it's like, well, what about this? What about this? Do you have this? How are we going to get this? It's, you really got to kind of, walk yourself through these steps on how to get from point A to point B. A lot of times I start from point Z, and how do I work back to get what I want? Where's my starting point? And then, what are the steps to get there? So I hope that anybody, watching this and engaging with us can, either, empathize or relate, to that, or be some type of learning tool for them. Or, for the late night crowd, hopefully there's a late night crowd. They're just stoned out of their gourd, and they need, to hear some stupid voice, and they get mine.
We are doing everything on such a shoestring budget, and as well as distribution, and as well as trying to get it out. And it's a lot of it is free labor. A lot of it is like, it's 2 to 4 guys in their 40s or close to their 40s starting a new venture, trying to produce things that we like, create things that we like, as well as we think other people will like. And there's going to be these trials and tribulations of how exactly to do that. How do we get the distribution? How do we get financing? How do we get creative with these things? Because right now everything's on a shoestring budget, or nobody, or everybody's volunteering and helping us, and some of our people that have actually decided to invest in some things with us, either their time or financial contributions. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. And anybody that has advice out there for us that we're doing something wrong, or advice for how to go about it, especially in those aspects of an infantile company that is looking for venture capital or financing or distribution, go to the link below. I don't know where it's going to be at, so whatever.
We'll have a link in the comment section for
That's a really good point, Pete. We're not standing here as almighty knowers of everything that we're trying to do. We're willing to learn, and if somebody can divulge new information, fantastic, and we're happy to provide. I think even through this, a platform to spread that word as well.
I mean, if you have a great script and a buttload of cash, we'll move that to the front and do that one for you. So,
yes. Yeah.
I mean, so let's talk.
We got the personnel.
Let's talk about, really, I mean, because you brought up some great points. I mean, first of all, this is definitely a labor of love. All of us have our own career paths, but we're finding the time, we're setting aside the time to kind of fulfill some of the dreams that we wanted to do, like create comics, art, and movies. And part of what we offer for this particular podcast is, again, showing people our trials and errors and our journey into creating finished pieces. That being said, I mean, it's not like we have not created finished work. I mean, Dan, you come back, you're coming from a background where you've created a number of independent comic books that have been published, and also some independent films as well. And I know, Pete, you've been a background to that as well. So I know you guys will be able to kind of lend that experience and that knowledge from a self-publishing aspect or a DIY aspect into this. But again, to kind of sum it up for our listeners, is really we're going to be presenting our insights into kind of how we get from point A to point B. And we've got several projects lined up, one of them being Camp Crash. Before we talk about Camp Crash, our current project, Dan, can you talk about some of the other projects you worked on, like Isolation Man?
Like what? Isolation Man?
Yes.
So Isolation Man was based on a comic book I did, 11 years ago, called The Exquisite Vanished Tear. I kind of did it as on a dare to see if I could illustrate a book in a weekend. It took me longer to write the damn book. So if you ever get yourself a copy, you can see that, yeah, clearly I illustrated on a weekend. But at the time, that project was greatly influenced by the political conversation that we were having with what was termed as illegal immigration. And of course, one side of the aisle was talking about they're here illegally, they need to be deported. Okay. But then I had very liberal friends that were telling me, oh, our culture is being consumed and repurposed by these these people coming over. I'm like, what the fuck? Who gives a shit? These are all people. They all need respect, and they're all over here for different reasons. But they all ultimately want to be loved. So the Vanished Tear character kind of came out of that short-sightedness and inability to relate to other people. And in particularly anybody that looks different than themselves. So essentially, the Vanished Tear character is a bigot, and he's a bit of a fascist. He's short-minded. He's not very bright at all. He's kind of my critique on how a lot of America seems to view people of foreign countries. Not all in general, just those that can't seem to empathize. But anyway,
basically,
I always thought it'd be an interesting thing to take that character and continue the story, because in the comic book, he has the ability to make things vanish. He has a really shitty day, and he makes the entire human population of the Western Hemisphere vanish. And all that's left is the Eastern Hemisphere. Well, that's where the film kicks in. And what a great excuse to have a cast, because everybody's fucking vanished. So on the Eastern Hemisphere, you have these documentary filmmakers, they're journalists, they want to come over and see what the hell happened. Why did all these people vanish? And they come over and they find this sad sack piece of shit of a person. And they really want to get in, invest the time and get at the core of what this character is. And just turns out he's a really shallow, shrill person. Just now he's really depressed because his circumstances have changed drastically. So that's that. And not necessarily a nutshell. That was pretty long-winded. But I originally. Yeah, at the time I was working on another project called Sons of Soil, and that really didn't get any legs. And another production company met with me. At the time it was called Crazy Horse Studios. But they, I pitched them the idea of doing a mockumentary that had no budget. And they found this very attractive because they were just starting out and they didn't have any capital, but they had the technical resources. And at the time, I wasn't working with a lot of people that I knew had those technical resources, all the equipment and the software and stuff like that. And I, and drawing on my experience of doing OFM, which was my stage performance group that I had directed and built up for 8 years. Prior to that, I was like, well, I can put together a no budget film. That's not a problem. We did, and we knocked it out. We shot it in a year, and we had absolutely no problem whatsoever, doing that. It was a great excuse to bring in all my talented friends that I had access to, and we had a lot of fun, and it was great. The post-production side sucked because people's circumstances change. You have no budget, so you have less incentive to keep those people around. Which is really unfortunate. So all my access to editing, really changed, and we had, the software and everything kept changing and everything, and files kept getting corrupted. So we had to. It wasn't until I met up with Peter Dougherty that we were able to air this film, and quite literally, he had to re-engineer all the film files. Is pretty miraculous what he was able to do. I take no credit, but yeah, we were able to release it. It's now online.
We'll post a link to that so people can kind of check out the film. It's kind of notorious, isn't it, for being a film that has been rejected from every film festival you guys have submitted it to?
100% of all film festivals rejected it.
This movie is too controversial to be in any of the film.
Yeah. Which is fine. That's always been kind of a question that I think has been, Pete and I have been going back and forth, is like, how valuable is a film festival? You invest a lot of money to enter them, and unless you really have that champion on the inside to see the film, get some real estate, it might be for naught. And with all these like streaming services and other opportunities online, it's like, why not pursue that? At a film festival, you're going to get, like, granted, industry insiders, and that's what you want, but then you've got this really small group that ever actually sees your film. And you had to pay there, to get there. And then if you were to get accepted, then you've got to pay to go there and pay for the hotel. I mean, there's a lot of logistical, issues that go along with that too.
No, I was gonna, like, and the financial side of it too is the idea of, like, okay, is it a benefit to go to these bigger ones, or would you want to go to more of a regional one? Do you want to go to just the Denver ones? And then the other one is all these rules that they put in that you can't, if you get accepted to this one, then you can't show them until this one, and you can't even present or send it to this one. And it's just one of those things. There's just like all these hoops you have to jump through. Distribution, you want your film out there, you want your creative source out there, you want people to see it, but are there avenues? And so maybe, that's why it's a perfect thing, is to do this type of a channel, post our own stuff, send it to somewhere where they can, if they like it, they can pay for it, they can stream it. It's one of those things where you want return traffic, but it is really frustrating. I'm in Indianapolis, and I know that there's a film festival here, and they just started having it, and it's like, okay, well, maybe when things get done, we'll submit to this film festival. We're definitely Denver, but you're gonna get nickel, and you're gonna get death by 1,000 cuts when you are on a budget.
Yeah.
And you have to budget $10,000 just to submit stuff to film festivals that get rejected.
So was that your role in the original or in the Isolation Man film? Were you, Pete, were you on the process, or were you on the committee that was submitting the films to these festivals?
On Isolation Man, I was the world's biggest groupie. I think I've seen it. I wasn't a part of Isolation Man at all, aside from when it was released and getting people to go to view it at the Alamo Drafthouse, view it up in Greeley, view it. I think I've seen it at viewings 5 or 6 times, but it's really just been support of that. I wasn't involved in that's Danny and my friendship has been around forever, since 6th grade, but our working relationship has only been around for about 3 years. After grad school to Denver, and then we started working on projects, and he pulled me in, and I volunteered as a financial director for an independent Comic-Con, and then after that, started working with Dan on different various projects. I think the first thing I did was the haunted pinball tournament that one of our friends puts on.
Yeah.
I think that was the first thing.
Yeah, I remember when you got back into town, I think you hit me up on Facebook or something, and we started texting and wanted to get together. At the time, I think my schedule was a little tight, but I was like, hey, why don't you come over and help? You're going to be doing some heavy lifting, but at least we can hang out a little bit. And so Pete was nice enough to do that, and just kind of escalated from there. It's like, what else can we do together and stuff. One thing with me is I noticed that all the friends that I hang out with are people I'm working with on projects, and usually currently, because I'm usually keeping myself so busy. I've got 4 or 5 projects going on at any one time, and so that's a lot of balls in the air. And the people I go to business meetings with or whatever, to me that's my social time. So, Pete's been there. Gerard, you've been there, and Kudus and Elise and Joe Oliver and stuff. You guys tend to be the guys I hang out with and go do stuff with. And to me, that's really cool because, later on we'll have this finished project, or at least that's what we're working towards, whereas, people that just go out and go to the bar and go get drunk, all they get is a hangover the next day.
Right. So let's talk about the current project that we're all working on right now. So the current project right now is a film that was written by you, Dan, and it's called, and you kind of mentioned it earlier in the show, called Camp Crash. So talk a little bit about Camp Crash. What is Camp Crash about? What is Camp Crash about, and what is the goal for Camp Crash?
So Camp Crash came about just a couple years ago, and it was this love of Mad Max, really. I had just moved my studio from a place called Wazi Union, and it's now at this place called Grace, which is this ridiculous refrigeration stockyard. And there's all this refrigeration and kitchen equipment in the yard, and it looks very dystopian. And I was like, wouldn't it be great to just write a script using one location? Again, keeping in mind that we're going to have our limitations. Most of them are going to be financial. So if you keep it all at one location, great. It'll be easier to execute. And so I was thinking, it's like, what is a good location-based, kind of theme? I thought, well, okay, dystopian summer camp. So I kind of mishmashed, Mad Max and Meatballs, and just went absolutely apeshit and gonzo. A lot of nods to like Mel Brooks too in it, which he has, which is pretty fun. But yeah, it's just just very absurdist. And initially, I wrote it as a feature film script, pretty standard, long form. And I think it was Kudus that made the suggestion. It's like, hey, as a project to endeavor upon, it might be easier to break it down into something more digestible, more palpable parts that we can attack as a production individually. And we don't do them until we have all the pieces in places. So by that, I took that to reference, break it down into serials. One of the more recent serials that I really enjoy is something called Stingray Sam by probably my favorite living American filmmaker, Corey Maccabee, and he's very much unknown. He was just in town last week, so I got to hang out with him. But Stingray Sam is a black and white space western musical, and it's broken down into serials, and it's very like YouTube friendly. So it plays in like 10 minutes or less chunks. And so I started modeling Camp Crash after that. And we would, basically we would end on a spot that felt like a good segue or an ending or a cliffhanger that would, ease into the next episode. And that's how I broke up the script. So we shot the first episode 2 months ago. It's still being edited, but it's kind of our proof of concept as well. Ryan Poliski, he's editing. It looks gorgeous. He shot all of it too. He's a fantastic DP. I can't wait to show. Well, you guys seen rough cuts, but I can't wait to show the world the finished product. I think it's already where it's at. It's shows a really solid evolution from where I was with Isolation Man, where I was just kind of haphazardly, taking whatever camera gear I hands on. Something like this that has an uptick in the production value, and it's consistent. So it's been pretty fun. yeah, like I said, right now we're in post production on the first episode. We'll be using that along with our business plans and pitches and crowdfunding platforms to really seek out investors. And then, you know, credit cards probably play into that too. My credit's been getting better. Yay! But yeah, the other thing, the other big component that made this happen is the remarkable talent that we have in our close group of friends. You know, I keep mentioning Elise and Kudis, and then, you know, I mentioned Ryan, but the cast is just outstanding. I've worked with like Alan Cutler, he's our lead. Hagar, you know, which Hagar T. Mangtooth, and you know, Hagar as in Sammy Hagar. He's our dystopian camp counselor. And he's just, you know, he's a little mad, you know, as you would expect from coming from that Mad Max world. And I've worked with him. He was my first cast member of OFM, and he's always a delight to have in your presence. He really does lighten up the room, and he's shows up, and you know, he's always on time, and you know, he's just so much fun to see and advises. And then, you know, the rest of the cast too are like Ashley and Bonnie and Pepper and Kelly are pretty, you know, fun and you know, very youthful feeling as well, because they're our camp goers.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
everybody that you've mentioned are all local to
yeah,
you know, local artists, people that have kind of volunteered their time here, and you know, some people that hopefully in the future that we'll be able to have on the show. And also, as you you know, as we kind of talk through this particular project, we already have some snippets posted online that we'll also have in the comment section for people to kind of check out for Camp Cash. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
we have the first little trailer marching scene. We also have the movie poster seems freaking epic. If we can post that, that's absolutely amazing. I think the thing too is with it being a volunteer, friends, family, fools that you can get to jump on this, we're just extremely blessed. I know that Danny listed a gambit of people and as well as working with them, but just the amount of talent and professionalism, and the cast morphed a few times. We had some tweaks here or there with some people with conflicts and scheduling, and I was just blown away with how amazing, one, they gelled together, two, the product that we have with it, and then it's unique, and it's quirky, and it's everything that like things with cinema. Um, I go to the major blockbusters. I go to all these different things too, but it just seems like the same old stories being told just in a different way, um, without this tinge of creative. And I think that this underground piecemeal, um, shoestring budget just brings a creative side that I love being a part of, and to me, it brings back the motion picture world and storytelling in its finest. You know, where it's, I'm very proud to be a part of this production, and it really is. You know, we shot over one weekend this first episode, and everybody was there at 5 in the morning, and people were volunteering to stay longer and to help out and do other things, and you know, one of my favorite crew members was my truck because it did everything for us. So, you know, by the name, it's El Guapo is my truck's name. So, but you know, I shut down a road. I shut down a road with my truck, and we were told, I don't know if we're allowed to do that. We're going to. We can't get semis to blow through and try to do U-turns right while we're trying to march through the
you
street.
did that one. That was pretty entertaining.
So,
yeah, we have a semi that's kind of barreled through, and he was a pretty good driver because I mean he went around the tent pretty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The deft.
Yeah, I've seen other truck drivers since then, go through that cul-de-sac, and they usually cut right through the middle.
So, but it's a great, it's a great. I'm excited about seeing the finished product. I respect Ryan when how fast, just again the quality of people that we have that we can reach out to and to work on projects with. The thing about it is that you want to, on my end, you want to give these, you want to provide a product that is worth tangible, worth something to people, where the tangible items come back to you, and it's really just so I can thank and benefit, the crew and the staff and the crew and the cast that we have, because they put a lot of themselves in from the first reading that we did with all the typos and all the draft of the script, and just it was hilariously fun. And it took us, I don't know, I think it took us like 3.5 hours to get through the script, and most of it was because we were all laughing and just enjoying our time, to being able to see it on set and run around and just having everybody jump in and do whatever they needed to do.
Yeah, we definitely owe it to everybody to put out a really good finished film project. One of the big things going into this was I wanted to make sure it was a big collaboration, and thereby everybody added their own 2 cents. The script itself is very vague in terms of like character descriptions and settings and props and locations. And it's just, I want to make it feel like they can create, the cast and extras can create their own characters and bring it in and kind of piece it together like a puzzle that might not really fit together very well, but that's kind of the charm to it, and also make it feel like a kind of a found object film, in that you can raid your garage, and whatever you bring out, those are going to be the props, those are going to be the weapons, and that's how the costumes get pieced together too. It's I'm actually I'm stunned, delighted, and so encouraged by all the people we were able to bring together in such a short amount of time, and see just that small bit of this larger project put together. And of course, if you're going to bring that group of people together, you better fucking feed them. So that's that. If you don't have the budget to pay for everybody and their time, you got to respect their time, and make sure you only have them there for as long as you absolutely need them, because they got other stuff to do. But feed them, and feed them well.
And hydrate.
So that's
it was a very hot day, so we had to hydrate them. And then the other thing too, though, is that just being respectful, just being thankful for them, letting them have a creative part so they feel like they're involved in it. So it's like a community theater, because again, when you're on my time and you're on my dime, there's a different role where you have to, when you're working with volunteers, it really does, you just have to be thankful, and you just have to be appreciative, and I am very thankful and very appreciative that you want them to give the product as you can. On a side note, between you guys, when we saw the first rough cut, and I know that this part's not good, this is going to fall on the editing floor, so I can ask this, did you guys realize that Ryan didn't put in that whole scene with him getting caught up on so the necklace is gone, the necklace is back, and the necklace is gone, and the necklace.
Yeah. It's there's
Content.
there's continuity conflicts. That's not the only one.
The glasses was the other one too. There was an editing thing. Go back if you want to watch it and look at. I was going to email this about, as like he takes his glasses off, he looks at them, and then he has his glasses back on. He looks down and he opens them up twice. I'm like, wait, does he keep putting them back on and off? So
there's a little trick to that kind of softens the blow, where in between those edits, you add a little bit of a filler. So you cut to something, in the environment, or like, a prop or something, and just, do the voiceover. And then, so in that first cut, he's got glasses off or something. And then you go to like, I think what we did, we put in a bus stop sign, and then cut to the next one where the glasses are back on. And so it kind of opens that idea of like, oh, maybe during that cut, he put the glasses back on, or people, because you have that little edit, it softens that, expectation. You don't register. It's not as abrupt. It's abrupt, but it's not. It's just soft. Walks it back, softens the blow.
And I think that when you're looking at it and you were there and you saw all the frames, you start nitpicking it because you're like, oh no, because this. Whereas if you're just watching it fresh, it flows fine.
Yeah. No, Ryan. When Ryan and I are at the editing table and we're talking about it and stuff, it's we just sit there and nitpick, and then he yells at me and I yell at him, and it's pretty fun. It's like George and Gracie at the editing bay. We're just nagging at each other.
That'd be a fun podcast. That'd fill an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man.
Obviously, we'll cut this part out. But the one thing that I did want to insert, after I edit this part out of the show, but I want to go back to something that Dan was saying. Obviously, if you're going to use a lot of volunteers, and you, Pete, was saying, you want to make sure that you hydrate them. You want to make sure you feed them. I'm sure one of the things that we're probably going to get asked about a lot, which is that reoccurring theme, is going to be, working for exposure. That's always the things like, if you don't have the pain, should be doing this. And, that's kind of one of the things that we'll be addressing on here, because I know that there's a lot of people out there. And Dan, I'm sure you've been hit up many a times to, work for exposure, and we'll probably address that as well too on this show. How many times we get asked to do something for nothing, and, sometimes it pans out, sometimes it doesn't. The majority of the time it doesn't. And so, one of the things that, you brought up is, hey, if you're going to use volunteers, make sure you feed them, make sure you, take care of them, at least in this way, not to say that, that's just one way, but in our community, at least here in Denver, Colorado, there's a lot of passionate people that just want to help to create, to be creative. Yeah. So, finding those like-minded individuals will be definitely, be an asset to you. But, I'm sure we're always going to hear that often. And it's definitely one of the things that kind of address during these shows, as far as whether we're doing comics, posters, or film. How do you get people to work for nothing is a question that we're probably going to be hit up with a lot during the tenure of the show.
And I think for me, one of the biggest things that I'd have to say is that on my own personal side, because I've helped out either in this new genre for the last few years or in other aspects where I volunteered, as long as I feel like I'm appreciated and not automatically assume that I'm going to do this, or again, being appreciated for, like, this is my time. Either, because if I'm not doing this, then I have a lot of, I'm a busy person, either in just leisure activities or working on other projects that aren't necessarily tied to film and the creative side. As soon as I feel like I'm not being appreciated, I'm just out. I just I'll fade to black and go do something else.
And on the other hand of it too, is what we want people to understand is, like, we're not asking people to work for exposure. We all are kind of not, we're all kind of working for exposure at this point. None of us are trust fund babies, right? I think so. Not to offend the trust fund babies out there, but none of us are coming in with a big bank account, or, making, I don't know if Dan's, maybe this podcast will help recoup some costs for making Isolation Man or any Cam Crash. But as far as I know, Dan is not a secret multi-millionaire, one of the top 1% feeding off of the blood, sweat, and tears of his volunteers. We're all kind of in the volunteer mode for all of this.
Yeah. I think it's also, would deserve some self-reflection, to make sure that we're not, taking advantage of somebody else too. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, every step of the creative process, I think it's worthwhile to kind of ask ourselves, these questions. Because I certainly don't. When I write a script, and if I know I'm going to be, I'm writing a character for myself, I want to make sure that if there's any self deprecation or anything involved in that, I'd much rather have my character go through that, because there's certain things that actors working for free, I don't want them to have to be humiliated or embarrassed or have to do.
Because there is a scene in Cam Crash where you're actually doing the nude scene, right?
Yeah. So that's that. Yeah, I kind of wrote my character as a little bit of the Bill Murray character at the beginning of Meatballs, and instead of doing the daily announcements, my character wakes up, without any pants on and scalds himself, drinking.
An amazing time.
So if
it was,
got to sit in that room for a while with this guy. It was
and it was
a
pretty
memory book I want to burn out.
Because hanging out with Pete and Cutis and David, like, you guys were so on the ball, and like Cutis is just sitting there.
Not literally.
I do have two. But Cutis is sitting there like, oh, this isn't well lit, and like, how he is. He's very mechanical, and he's just like, no, your crotch just isn't well lit, and this and that. And I think the most professional guy, the guy who has, does this stuff for a living, he was about ready to throw up. I mean, I could hear him on the phone, when he was like trying to give camera directions and stuff, and then you look when he's, comes up through the window to get the shot, his eyes are just
on a
bulging.
ladder
like,
in the back of my truck again.
Yeah. He's just like, okay, you got the shot. Is it good? All right, good. Let's move on to the next shot. Very by the numbers. I mean, everybody else is by the numbers, and it's just so funny watching Ryan's expressions, like, oh my God, oh. This is like, dude, you make fun, shitty little B movies. It's like, hey, for you. But no, it's fun. But that's the type of stuff that I try to be conscious of, and if I'm not, I hope somebody points it out, because I'm willing to learn from those mistakes, and I try not to let my ego get the best of me, because I think that that might not make for a good project, and I want everybody to have fun. If it's not fun,
right. And so on that note, if you stay tuned, follow the show, and kind of follow this journey through our production of Cam Crash, at least the big thing that you'll get is that you get to see Dan naked. So that's one of the bonus upsides of sticking through.
Eventually. It's so small.
Anything better, if anything else, when you get to see Dan, get to feel really good about yourself.
I think everybody should.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this first inaugural episode of the Misassembled podcast, the official podcast of Misassembly LLC. Tune in again. We'll be talking about our favorite films. We'll be talking about independent comics. We'll also be talking about the comic con scene, which all three of us have experience in, either working at it or working for one. And so we'll drop some knowledge about our experience and our time there. Don't forget to follow and like us on our Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter, which we'll post the links down in the comment section, as well as visit our website, misassembly.com. That's misassembly.com. Not two S's, which I know a lot of people get confused with. But until next time, I've been Gerard Kaihui with Dan Crosier and Pete. Any final words before we sign off?
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you.